Welcome back to the BetCanada channel. Katie Caldwell and Jeff Lloyd here with you. We continue our division preview series. So, Jeff, let's get into the NFC South. This division has been pretty uneventful for a while. I think it could be maybe a bit more interesting this year. The Bucks are the clear number one, right?
Yeah, even with unfortunately today's news, left tackle Tristan Wirfs and knee surgery. They're
Mhm.
slating somewhere early in the regular season for hit or return. Certainly a blow. A guy that began his NFL career as a right tackle, became an All Pro at right tackle, has become an All Pro at left tackle. Something that you just don't normally see because once a guy is
Yeah.
All Pro at one position, who would ever think to move him? But Wirfs, to
Mhm.
his credit, challenged himself and certainly went to the left side and certainly has made his day and his hay over there. Baker Mayfield, and it's probably one of the better stories in the NFL right now. The situation and the way it began in Cleveland, the way it ended in Cleveland,
Yep.
then that season of limbo where, all of a sudden he showed up in LA on a Wednesday, was, a star on a Thursday night football game where he basically knew about
Mhm.
9 plays, and then finally settles in at Tampa, the first year. And then all of a sudden, here's Tampa with a large contract extension over $100 million, feeling
Yeah.
that, Baker has found his way there. Great weapons. Like the wide receiver room for
Mhm.
Tampa, it's crazy. First off, they have too much. And, I don't know how they're going to work it all. I mean, you have Mike Evans, who's a true established, going to be a Hall of Famer one day.
Yep.
Chris Godwin, even though there's been some injuries, has always been a magnificent performer. You take your first round pick and what the heck? We'll just draft another wide receiver in Emeka Mbuka out of Ohio State. And, he's not going to be on a normal round one wide receiver path because ideally he's probably number three walking in there.
Yeah.
You have guys, Sterling Shepard, who was good last year. Jalen McMillan was a third round pick last year, and he was the one that performed well when Godwin went down.
Mhm.
Trey Palmer, you used another first round pick on Deontay Johnson out of Oregon later. Again, they are deep. Otten is a really good player. Bucky Irving was a day three running back gem for them. I
Yep.
tried to tell people that the 24 draft class at running back, they weren't going to go high. They were going to go
Uh-huh.
on day three and they were going to perform. And for the most part, my fruition came true there. Um, the offensive line has obviously got to hold it together while Wirfs is out. And anytime you're
Yeah.
hearing that a 320-pound, obviously offensive lineman is having knee surgery, you certainly have a level of concern, that he's going
Mhm.
to come back in season. Are they going to cheat the rehab process? Is it going to be legit? Is he going to go when he's ready? Or is he going to go when he's needed? When he goes when he so guys go as needed, it's not necessarily the best recipe. So certainly I wouldn't say a huge question, but a question for Tampa the way they're currently constructed. Their defense, again, overall, there are no world beaters on this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Single-handedly. Vita Vea is a nice player, but he doesn't play a ton of reps. He's obviously the
Mhm.
run-stuffing defensive guy, goal line guy. Hassan Reddick, you're taking a leap of faith here? Because, I mean, it kind of seems like Hassan Reddick right now is a guy who, wants to do everything he can to get paid, but maybe the least amount he possibly can actually have to play to get his
Mhm.
pay, as, the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Jets certainly learned. Their secondary, nice players. Antoine Winfield Jr. has always been a really, really good player. Jamal Dean has been a nice, long, physical corner for them. But
Yeah.
you get to certainly the linebacker position. And, first one that just absolutely sticks out to you, of course, is Levante David.
Mhm.
And Levante David, since turning the age of 30, which I believe is now 5 seasons, has averaged 100 tackles per season. I mean, Ponce de Leon, absolute fountain of
Um,
youth, this guy is. He just, goes in, week out, year in, year out. And then you actually look at the age and you look at the amount of time he's been in the NFL and absolutely just blows your mind, that he's in on 100 tackles, 13, 14
mhm.
seasons in the NFL. Tampa, and this is sometimes also, which is really tough for teams in the NFL, if you don't necessarily are getting challenged within your division, you don't necessarily know how much more you need or how much more you have to do.
Mm.
So, Tampa's in a good spot right now, but until, they start taking a punch or two from somebody else within that division, you don't know if that maybe they feel there's more needed because they get to the playoffs, but then it's usually a quick flame out, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, it's a good team. And again, look, it only takes 10 wins probably to get to take the NFC
Mhm.
South anyway. Um, so for Baker Mayfield and certainly that passing game and the offensive line, it's just going to continue to go. And I think they really put together a nice unit for Baker to, basically be the best
Yeah.
version of himself, even though he's going to throw a lot of interceptions. It's something you live with when you know you're getting 4,000 yards and you know you're getting 35, 36, 37 touchdown passes from
Yeah.
your quarterback.
It was so cool to see Chris Godwin take such a hometown discount. Like, that's such a good problem to have is we have too many good wide receivers, especially when some of them have injury history.
Well, and
Their
also
defense,
I
you're
think the
right
thing,
about
yeah. Well, the thing with Tampa though is normally in those situations it's a 1-year deal. Hey, stay with us. Let's get you healthy. Let's
Yeah.
get you rehabbed. Then we'll
Yeah.
revisit. And Tampa's like, no, no, no. We'll give you what you would have been worth. And
Mhm.
that rings obviously. That is a great statement from an organization because a lot of times in those
Yes.
situations it would have been, hey, 1 year, 4 mil, whatever you make after that and
Mhm.
guarantees, da 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 da. They didn't. They basically threw a bag at Chris Godwin and said, our faith is in that you will get healthy.
Yeah. And you're right about the defense. They don't have that big game record, but if there is a coach that I trust to get more out of his guys than other coaches, it is Todd Bowles. And Hassan Reddick, he's interesting to me because he felt like a pretty low risk, high reward move. Like, who knows? We don't know what he's going to look like. There is a world where I think it could work out really well. I never imagined we'd be talking about this 3 years ago, that it is so fun watching Baker Mayfield play football. He has just been one of the best feel good stories of the last couple seasons. In terms of who they would be taking a punch from, because you're right, they've had a pretty easy ride the last couple seasons. I think the Panthers are getting a lot better. Oh,
I
the
think
Panthers and the Falcons are both pretty interesting to me. Let's start with the Panthers here. What's your read on them? Because I'm excited to watch Bryce Young this season. He started to really pick it up in that second half, and then they add some weapons for him. They bring in Ted McMillan. To me, they're better on both sides of the ball, and they have a pretty sneaky good run game. I think the Panthers could be a little closer than people expect.
I wanna give the Panthers credit because there was that brief time last year where they actually sat Bryce Young, and it was,
Yeah.
something was going on, obviously, and once they put Bryce Young back in, all of a sudden, "Hey, he was a former number 1" all of a sudden, those memes and those jokes, and remember the small memes of him standing next to all the other quarterbacks?
Yeah.
Those things just really seemed to go away, and it
It
was,
started to click
more
for
of
him.
yeah, it seemed like the game maybe slowed down, and, all of a
Yes.
sudden, it was like, "Hey, you know what? I can do this. I can play at this
Mhm.
level." And, it's again, rookie quarterbacks, it is always extremely, extremely difficult. I'm not going to deny you, though, as far as, the running attack, Chuba Hubbard, and if you remember a couple of years ago, this team went out, spent free agent money on Miles Sanders. Chuba
Mhm.
Howard basically looked at him and said, "Well, I don't know what you paid this guy for because, this is gonna look like a sunken cost for you because I'm just gonna go out there and outplay him." And to his credit, he 100% did that. Sneaky underrated, they brought in Rico Dowdell, which was interesting just because he was all Dallas had last year running the ball. And I don't think Dallas
Yeah,
really
that was a
valued
good
that all that
pickup.
much. And Dallas really didn't do much of the running back position for this year either. But there's
No.
Dowdell. It should be a nice combination for them. And
Yeah.
Ted McMillan and and he was a really, really, misunderstood prospect as far as, 'cause, oh, well, there was a tape of him as a freshman where basically he was like, I don't like to watch film. He didn't know how to watch film. That was basically what it was. He didn't really
Mhm.
know how to watch film. Most freshmen going into college football don't necessarily know how to do it, know what they're looking for, and know how to read it. But Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen, still just getting it done. And I think Thielen
Yeah.
coming back
Yes.
for this year was a really smart move for the Panthers, and it was a good thing that happened to them because, Bryce Young in a tough situation, and basically he
Mhm.
is, the same age as Leggett. He is the same age as McMillan. When in doubt, you go to the guy who's been doing it for a really, really long time, and Adam Thielen is
Yeah.
certainly, that type of guy. Um, you get to the defensive side of the ball. And I think the defensive line it's big, it's physical, it's
Mhm.
good in containing the run game. They brought in Trayvon Moring, which was a nice addition to their secondary with J.C. Horner, who is their shutdown cornerback. Added, Josie Jewell, who's just an underrated linebacker. It's one of those guys that, nobody ever talks about. He's not the flashiest athlete, but you look and you look at his, his PFF grades, you look at his statistical output year in, year out. He's the guy that basically leads his team in,
Mhm.
tackles. So I think for Carolina, definitely trending in an upward
Mhm.
direction. And like I said with Tampa, it's not that Tampa I feel is just light years ahead of everybody else. It was just that maybe everybody else was just kind of
Yeah.
stuck in neutral, so to
Yeah.
speak. And now, I agree. Yes, Atlanta. I agree. Carolina. All of a sudden, there's going to be some contenders, and those games for Tampa Bay against Carolina, and certainly against
Mhm.
Atlanta, they're gonna mean something legitimately and big because, again, you don't know when you look at this division that this is a team that's getting more than one. So whoever wins the
Yeah.
South probably punches the only playoff ticket for that division.
Yeah, I think you could be right with that one. Quick pause. If you haven't subscribed to the BetCanada YouTube channel, you can do so below. It's free and it helps support our channel so we can keep bringing you NFL and NHL content. Now, back to the show. Let's move into the Falcons next. So this is a tough one for me to read. I think they've got a pretty large ceiling to floor situation here. So much hinges on Michael Penix Jr. Their defense did improve this offseason, which they desperately needed. What's your read on the Falcons this year?
Well, and I'm actually kind of in the line where I think Kirk Cousins actually, I believe it was, the quarterback series on Netflix or whatever it is. And he basically said, like, I signed with them. And, when the Falcons drafted Michael Penix, Kirk Cousins basically had all the same reaction all of us did. Well, what in the world did you just give Kirk Cousins $100 million for guaranteed
Yeah,
if your intention was to just go draft a quarterback? Nothing
right.
changed. You could have done this the whole time. And, so they tried to play it out with Cousins. And to be fair, Kurt was dinged up, and at this age, you can't play through injury the way guys can in their 20s, and it certainly showed in Kirk's play. But then all of a sudden, you plug in Penix, and all of a sudden now Drake London looks like this guy that you spent a really high draft choice on years
Mhm.
ago. He's performing like, an absolute beast. Kyle Pitts has always been an interesting guy because you don't usually see guys go progressively lower in their statistical output from their rookie year as the years go on. So I think
Yeah.
he's kind of a guy that's just kind of there for them at this point. Bijan Robinson, I think, is a guy that, and I think I'll just say, I don't know if Atlanta uses him enough because for
I agree
where
with
they
that.
once, for
Mhm.
where he was picked, you would think Bijan Robinson, the ball is going to be in his hands 25 to 30 times a game. This is why you draft running backs that high. This is what the
Yeah.
expectation should be for Ashton Genty in Las Vegas.
He is
Um,
such a strong runner. He's such a good player. I feel like so
yep.
many Falcons fans or people that drafted him in fantasy last year were screaming, "Why isn't he getting the amount of touches that we all thought?" But I feel like we had that
Well,
conversation so many times in the years before about Kyle Pitts, about Drake London. Like their offense is always really interesting and just never what people are screaming for them to do.
I think part of that, and of course, now as we transition to the defense, I think part of that though, and the problem with that is where are you in game situation? If you're trailing, which obviously it's franchise like Atlanta has been doing for a majority of the time over the last few years,
Yeah.
having a feature running back kind of gets eliminated from the script, the game plan. Now you go out and look, they were bold. They didn't they told everybody during the draft that their problem they felt was pass rush. They absolutely felt
Yeah,
their issue was pass rush. They did not just take one first round edge rusher, they took two edge rushers in the first round. They kind of need these guys to hit. And,
they
Leonard
do.
Floyd is there, has always been a great situational pass rusher for teams. Not necessarily the guy, but a nice compliment to the guys. But you bring in Jalen Walker. Um, James Pierce was interesting just because everybody kind of just soured on the guy because basically he told Tennessee last year, I'm here to get through the year healthy and I'm here to go to the NFL. You can play me 12 snaps, you can play me 13 snaps. I have no inclination of playing 65 snaps. And people try to make up things and knocks on people through the draft process. You would think that would have been a tremendously large knock, but somehow, some way, he still ended up going in the first round.
Yeah.
So it told you certainly what the issue was. What Atlanta, teams will tell you what their issues are. Obviously, Atlanta
Mhm.
told us that as far as pass rush. Secondary, Jesse Bates was a great addition for them a few years ago. AJ Terrell is a nice corner for them. They brought Mike Hughes in a couple years ago from Detroit. Jordan Fuller came over from Carolina. Ironically, it's always weird for me when these guys within division just basically go from one city to the next within their own division. Kind of like the
Yeah.
kissing cousins theory. But Michael Penix, and, to Michael Penix's credit, it was a really, really strange college scenario with injuries, certainly with COVID, which allowed him to lengthen his career, then finally getting to a place and, having the luxury while I was at Washington to play with three wide receivers that, got drafted in the first round, the second round, the third round, which really, you always want to say, well, what does your talent look like with what will be your NFL peers? It was really easy to see that with Michael Penix's
Mhm.
last year at Washington. And, I think that the lasting question of the Falcons' 24 season is, well, what did you wait so long to put Penix in for? And, I
Yeah.
think between that, the addition of the pass rushers, which should aid secondary play. And I think, I'm not there yet on Carolina, but if you're going to tell me who I think should be able to challenge Tampa Bay the most in the South this year. You look at these moves from Atlanta and, trading up back into round one, that's an all-in move. You would
Mhm.
think for Atlanta, they're trying to tell everybody that they think they're a lot closer to Tampa Bay than maybe some other folks feel they are.
And lastly, and that is firmly where I have this team, are the Saints. This team is a bit of a hot mess in my eyes, and I don't think they got a lot better this offseason. Obviously, the number one question is with Derek Carr out, who is the quarterback going to be? I think they'll be running the ball a ton this year, but yeah, QB is obviously the big question here. What's their ceiling? Is it 5 wins?
I, me
I'm so out
personally,
on the Saints, if you can't tell.
I think the New Orleans Saints don't want 5 wins. I think the New Orleans Saints, and I've actually had some conversations with some guys who cover the Saints. My belief, the plan for the New Orleans Saints is how fast can we get our hands on Arch Manning? Because you think what
Okay,
would be
yep.
the Manning's ultimate dream for now the next guy in the lineage? It would be for
Mhm.
him somehow, some way to be in the team in the closest proximity of obviously the Mannings. Now, look, we have no idea what the intentions are for Arch Manning. And for all intents and purposes, what we've been told is Arch Manning is going to go and stay at Texas for 4 years. This will only
Mhm.
be year three. You tell me there's a scenario where come week 18, the New Orleans Saints lose and we find out the New Orleans Saints are officially on the clock. Does that change things in the Manning belief? We know the Mannings will dictate how they want things to go. We've
Yes,
already
they
seen
will.
that story play out.
Yeah.
And certainly the ideal scenario for Eddie Manning would be to maybe get to New Orleans as well. But on that, you look at this team and it's just like, what is the one thing about the Saints where you go, oh, well, no, there's just no part of the Saints. And, even Alvin Kamara, as talented as he is,
I would have
if
said that 3
everybody in
years
the
ago
building
with
yeah,
Kamara.
but if everybody in the building is keying on Alvin Kamara, where is going to be the success for Alvin Kamara?
Exactly.
Because, you're not scared of the quarterback position by any means whatsoever. Whether it's Shuck, whether it's, Spencer Rattler. Okay. But I mean, neither, just because you took Tyler Shuck in round two doesn't necessarily mean he was a round two quarterback. It was certainly a
Mhm.
surprise when the Saints took him where they were. Um, the offensive line, it it's okay. I mean, it's not great, but it's not gonna matter because I don't think anybody's got a lot of faith in either of these quarterbacks. Having Chris Olave and Brandon Cooks and Rashid Shaheed, okay, it's not a bad wide receiver core. It's not scaring the death out of anybody. But I mean, there's a glaring hole on this roster. And I don't think it's going to be Tyler Shuck. And I have my belief on what the ultimate plan certainly is for the New Orleans Saints. And you flip it over to the defensive side of the ball, and it's the same kind of thing. Okay, Kool-Aid McKinstry is a nice name. He's not by any means a standout corner within this NFL. They Chase Young re-signed, okay, but again, he's not the Chase Young that came out of Ohio State years and years
Right.
ago. Carl Granderson is an okay player. There's no standout linebacker. There's really no standout secondary player. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu is a name. Let's be honest. This is a really poor franchise right now, and you
Yeah.
tell me what's probably the team that will be the worst and finish with the worst record in the NFL in 2025. I mean, it has to scream New Orleans Saints. And I think most of this season for the New Orleans Saints is getting obviously to what is the 2026 draft and how that could possibly work for them. Because if I believe if there is one team within the NFL that could deter the Manning family from Arch staying 4 years, it would probably be the hometown team.